Taylor Britt and Zachary Carter, two new Bengals added on day 2 of the draft. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We're coming to you after day 2 of the 2022 NFL Draft. The Bengals have added 2 more players. They traded up in a shocking move, to some degree shocking. We'll talk about those players. Taylor Britt from Nebraska in the 2nd round, and Zachary Carter from Florida in the 3rd round. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. If you're new to the show, checking us out because the NFL Draft is going on. We're a 5 times daily Bengals podcast. We're on, as I mentioned, all the podcast platforms and on YouTube. So if you're new, hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, and we'll cover the Bengals for you 5 days a week, every day. Thanks for making us your first listen if you are an existing listener. And James, let's get on into that 2nd round. Taylor Britt from Nebraska, after trading up just a handful of spots, giving up 209, I believe, to move up those couple spots with Buffalo. What was your first impression of the selection of Taylor Britt?
2 things. One, you give up a 6th rounder, you move up 3 spots in the 2nd round. Worth it if you're getting your guy. We've talked about how shallow the cornerback class is after we said round 3, that there's one guy in round 3 and Kobe Bryant actually is still on the board. But clearly, after listening to Zach Taylor and Lou Anarumo talk about these guys, or talk about Taylor Britt, it was a target of theirs. And it was a guy they wanted. It was a guy they had to have. And first reaction was, I'm pretty sure that was Taylor Britt was in my what I would do mock. So, I think that the Bengals are doing something right? Because they were able to get the guy in Dax Hill, who I think is a freakish athlete and can help them on defense. And then they still got a corner who's also athletic, extremely fast, ran a 4.38 as well at the 40-yard dash, and is super competitive. I mean, this kid. He was talking on a conference call. You could feel him competing. Like if I was like, hey, Cam, we're about to arm wrestle, this dude would be like, all right, I'm about to fly there and kick your ass in arm wrestling. Like he's that type of dude. He brought that kind of energy. Said he couldn't wait to play with Jamar Chase and see Higgins and line up against them in practice and face them, and couldn't wait for that. I even asked him, I was like, well, you're so competitive. I was like, Dax Hill ran the same 4.38 you did. And he was like, we can race. And he said he was down to race. Like, so this guy from a personality standpoint is, off the charts. And the Bengals, they like the size, length, and athleticism. And he's much like Hill, versatile. I mean, he's lined up at safety. He's lined up at nickel. He's played, outside. And I think that's where they want him to play. It's not like they're drafting a bunch of safeties, ladies and gentlemen. That's not what they're doing. But it is nice that he can play multiple spots if you need him to.
Yeah, I think he's going to be an outside corner. That's, I think, what Lou Anarumo and or Zach Taylor said in their press conference. That's where he's going to at least start his career.
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because that's what they need, right? Yeah. But if Mike Hilton gets nicked up and you need him to slide over for whatever reason, then, he can do that too, which is always nice.
And we watched one game of his. We watched him against Michigan as we were doing our live stream, and he looks like a 2nd-round corner. There are some things to like. The speed shows up from time to time. He has a hard time getting off blocks sometimes. He's played mostly zone in the one game that we watched this afternoon or this evening, I should say. And there are a few things to like there. I think he finds the ball pretty well in the air, although I've seen others criticize his ball skills. And look, he's not a 1st-round corner for a reason here, but had elite productivity. And that's something that we talked about yesterday with Dax Hill at safety, something they really like at safety. Elite market share productivity, as we talked about with Joe Goodberry and Jim Metrics. And like you said, that 4.38 at times looks a little bit stiff to change direction, looks a little bit like he has some balance issues from time to time when he tries to play it coming out of a back pedal, but that doesn't show up all the time. And there's more good than bad I thought, on his tape. The competitiveness certainly shows up. And it's interesting to hear that he's so swaggy in his interview as well. I didn't get to listen to that. But the most important thing is probably that his nickname is Cam Juice.
Yeah, it's Juice. What about
It was
that? How
meant to
about that?
be.
How about that foreshadowing? And he certainly brings juice. And your guy Stanley Morgan Jr., who I'm going to say his name right, even though you don't say his name right, you call him Morgan Stanley for our new listeners, by accident, of course. But Stanley Morgan Jr., they know each other really well. They played with each other at Nebraska. And he was like, "Oh, that's my older brother." He was like, "That's who kind of set the standard." And in that part of it's fun too, because Stanley Morgan is such a hard-nosed practice player and brings it and has created this, role on this team, signed a 2-year deal this offseason. And yeah, he's that's kind of the blueprint. Now, Cam Taylor Britt's a different type of prospect, different type of all that stuff, but certainly good to have that part of it as well. But no, I look, he's not a first-round corner, but let's do an either or, right? I mean, think about who was there at 31 versus what they ended up getting. Like, I like this version where you have clearly the top player on their board, and I confirm that, Dax Hill. By the way, he goes by Dax. I need to stop saying Daxton. He told me that. Dax, which is easier to say, so why would I go the full length? Anyways, Dax Hill, and then you get a guy, Cam Taylor Britt, who, much like I thought, I don't think the Bengals were going to have the corner, and maybe Elam, but whatever corner they got early, I don't think it was like, oh yeah, you're going to take Eli Apple's job from the get-go. Now, could the Cam Taylor Britt earn it? Sure, of course. But the Bengals said multiple times today, yeah, we didn't need any starters. Like our starting lineup is kind of set on defense. So that's it's quite interesting.
I also noticed in one of the draft room videos that Brian Callahan was wearing a sweatshirt tonight while Lou Anarumo still had his collared shirt on. So maybe some foreshadowing there as well.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I talked to Brian about that and someone brought it up and we were talking about it. And yeah, that's it's funny. I don't think that was direct, and I made that comment after the first round, and who tweeted it? Someone tweeted it out. And I saw it on my timeline, and that's why it got brought up. Someone else saw it on Twitter.
Oh yeah.
But that wasn't by plan, a plan for him, but it was quite funny. But yeah, I would expect to see Brian Callahan at least a few times on Saturday. They still have 4 picks, even though they moved that 6th rounder. So we'll see. But you were right. Defense. And first time since 1998 that they've done this, I believe. So the Bengals wanted defense, and they got it. And the other thing, and we'll talk about Zachary Carter, the defensive tackle. But you mentioned Cam Taylor Britt's production. We talked about his athleticism. Dax the same way. All these guys, you look at the relative athletic score, they all scored pretty high, and they were all productive. And so that part of it, I think there's a theme there. Athletes that were productive at big time schools.
Yeah, and I thought, from a grade perspective, if I were to give this an instant grade, Cam Taylor Britt's probably like a B again for me. There are some guys I would have taken instead at different positions. And if they were clearly for the Bengals, they had Cam Taylor Britt at the top of their board. They traded up.
Yep.
They traded up, and they never trade up. They didn't give up much, but they traded up. They gave up a full pick. I know it's a 6th round pick. They gave up a full pick to go
Can you
up.
give up a half pick?
And a pick swap. Like you trade a 6
for
a 7.
I guess. Sure. Yeah. But they're picking at the end of the set. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a pick swap situation where they give up a 6 for a 7th. It's a full. Sure. Yeah, that's all I mean. Yeah. But they really like Cam Taylor Britt. And you go look at the video yesterday of the draft room when they select Daxton Hill, and you see this guy come out of nowhere and have the hardest, loudest handshake I've ever heard in my life. And it's Andrew Johnson, who's one of the Bengals scouts. Mm-hmm. And he was interviewed. I think it was Bengals.com. That was his favorite player in the entire draft. So you talk about the first 2 picks the Bengals have made here. Mm-hmm. One of their scouts' favorite players in the draft in Dax Hill, and a guy they were willing to trade up for. Mm-hmm. And given their history, that tells you what they think of both these guys, and we'll find out in time whether they're the right picks. Zachary Carter, a bit more controversial, I would say, in the 3rd round. We'll dive into Zachary Carter coming up next.
we already talked about Cam Taylor Britt and his swag, his juice that he brings. Well, he's got to get some Shady Rays in his life. And obviously he can't wear them on the field, but you're talking about quality sunglasses for what? Second round money, right? You don't have to spend as much. And that's the beauty of Shady Rays, because you're not spending $200+ on quality sunglasses. You're getting them at a reasonable price, but they are high end. They look awesome. And by the way, if you lose them, if you sit on them in your car or something, you break them, they're going to replace them for free. It's that simple. Lost for free. Broken, they replace them for free. So you got to get the shadyrays.com right now. And the best part, you're going to get 50% off your order of 2 or more pair of polarized sunglasses with promo code Locked On. LOCKEDON. Promo code Locked On. You'll get 50% off your order of 2 or more. So you could buy 7, you could buy 17, you could buy 85. Doesn't matter. You can do it right now. Shadyrays.com. Promo code Locked On.
And you mentioned that Cam Taylor Britt was a player that you selected in one of your What Would I Do mock drafts, in your What Would I Do mock draft that we released on Monday. Can you give it a quick grade before we dive into Zachary Taylor, the selection of Cam Taylor Britt after trading up in the second round?
It's probably a B, because you're grading it by itself, right? But to me, the reason I like Cam Taylor Britt and I like the idea of going corner round 2 was because of the idea that a lot of people were in on, which was the Kyler Gordon round 1, or Andrew Booth Jr., who fell out of the top 40 round 1. And that would feel like a reach to me. And I didn't want to feel the need to reach. And so on its own, Cam Taylor Britt, I think it's a B. But it also allowed you to get, because you're confident that he could play corner and you like him as a prospect, it allowed you to take a Dax Hill, who's at the top of your board. So it's a package deal, and we can get to full grades later. But yeah, for that exact guy, I would give it a B, which is it's pretty damn good, because you not only pass with a B, you get a diploma and you get to salute and do whatever you do. It's graduation season, so shout out to all those people that are graduating.
Good shout. Graduation season. I haven't thought about that in years, which makes me feel very old.
You are old.
You picked Cam Taylor Britt in your What Would I Do mock.
Yep.
I picked Zachary Carter, you might remember, in my What Will They Do mock. And it was a pick that I was the least confident in.
You were.
And
it was the one that you were like, I want that one back. Because I think you had already had a defensive lineman, and that was the one you doubled down on.
Yeah, I can't remember the specifics. Unfortunately, I'm glad you do. I'm going to have to go back and watch the episode to see who I drafted. But Zachary Carter, I drafted for the Bengals in the 4th round of the What Will They Do mock. And it was because he fits their profile in a lot of ways for a defensive tackle who has some versatility. 282 pounds, 6'4", played inside and outside at Florida. And his role with Cincinnati is going to be inside. So there will be a transition, I think, for Zachary Carter, especially as I heard from the press conference, he's going to start at 3 tech and then maybe kick out to 5 tech, which means he's lining up outside the guard instead of over the tackle. So between the guard and tackle versus over the tackle. And so given where Zachary Carter will play for the Bengals, there will be a transition. He played all over the place for Florida, had varying levels of productivity depending on where you look, but his market share productivity thresholds that we talked about with Joe Goodberry come in, as Joe tweeted, just shy of Pro Bowl thresholds. His athleticism is above average, but some of the explosion testing wasn't great, and the explosion testing would be the jumps. However, was a fairly productive player at Florida. It just feels like this, for the consensus, for the public perception, was a little bit early, and was early compared to where I mocked him to them, even though I got the player right. So pat myself on the back, I guess, but I was around later. And the last time this happened, I think I was around later on Logan Wilson too. And they drafted him around before I had him, and he turned out okay.
I thought it was the
Logan
other
Wilson's
way,
any indicator.
but maybe I'm wrong.
What's that?
It wasn't? I thought it was the other way, but maybe I'm wrong, because I don't think you had him 33rd overall either, Logan Wilson. So
no, I had Logan Wilson 1 round later. I had him in the 4th, and they picked him in the 3rd.
Gotcha.
So same
Okay.
deal.
Yep. Couple things. One, I think he was he had 8 sacks, 11
Mhm.
tackles for loss. He did play 3 tech, some at Florida
He did.
already. So all of those things make sense. I just think, and this is when we went into the draft, it was, the consensus is going to be different. And I think there have been some surprises and some guys that went higher and then lower. And this is a guy, look, Perry and Winfrey's still available.
There's
And
got to be
so
something wrong there, right?
there's got to be, because I had it written. I had the story written for 63rd overall.
Yeah.
And I talked to a couple of people, not internally with the Bengals, but here. And it was like, oh, yeah, Winfrey would make sense. And then 95th overall, I'm like, all right, he's still there. Like, you're taking him, because they still needed the defensive tackle.
Yep.
And they went with Zachary Carter. So there's got to be something there. But I do look at it, and you're right. He wasn't the overall relative athletic scores high, but yeah, there's some things that aren't great on it, but did have a lot of number production, the traditional numbers that you want to see. So I like that part of it, but I agree with you. Feels like a reach, feels like a round too early, but in a shallow defensive line class, when they clearly needed someone, people were freaking out that they went corner rounds. There were a lot of people like, when are they going to get a defensive lineman? When are they going to get a defensive lineman?
Yeah.
And so they addressed that. And I even asked Zach about, kind of their draft strategy. And I was like, look, did you feel like you needed one on day 2? And he kind of talked his way around it. But I think they might have, to a degree, because it is shallow. I mean, you look at it, if Winfrey's off the board, Josh Paschal was gone before their 2nd round pick.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like there are a lot of different options. So I think that they got a guy that they think can come in and be that 3 tech and be productive. And they won't say this, even though they were asked it about replacing Larry Ogunjobi, but I think they think that he can do an admirable job at doing that. Now, it'll be a committee. It's not going to be just him, but I think they believe he can be productive from the jump.
And I think that's what he profiles to do at his size. That's what they'll ask him to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes a lot of sense. I do wonder about the versatility. He was very versatile at Florida. I don't think that necessarily translates to the NFL. The other noteworthy thing for him, I would say, is very long, 33.5-inch arms.
Huge
violent,
wingspan.
Strong hands. Yeah. So he can maybe use some of that to his advantage.
81 inches. That's crazy.
Pretty long. We'll see if he can use that to his advantage. And I wonder what's going on with Perry and Winfrey.
Yeah.
I wonder. So in the 2nd round, I thought it's going to be. I was talking about Travis Jones quite a bit since he was still available. I was talking about Drake Jackson from USC, who went 1 pick later quite a bit for the Bengals, and they traded up, and then he went 1 pick later. So he probably would not have been available had they not traded up.
See. Yeah, he went at 61.
Yeah, that's right. And so I was surprised. I don't know what's going on with Perry and Winfrey. And I was also surprised by Zachary Carter. That wasn't one of the names that I had pegged for the 3rd round. I was thinking Kingsley Mcguire, who's still unpicked, Perry and Winfrey, who's still unpicked, Charlie Kohler, and I think they're going to go tight end next. I think tight end is
Don't spoil it. We got to get to that next. Speaking of next, don't spoil it now.
There's other positions too. I thought Sean Ryan was a possibility, and then Sean Ryan got picked before the Bengals had a chance to pick. And Jamery Sawyer still available. Marquise Hayes still available if they're interested in addressing the offensive line, the interior of the offensive line. But overall, I would give day 2 a B- without knowing more about Zachary Carter. I guess we don't know what he prefers. Do you know what he prefers?
Zach. We're calling him Zach.
Yeah. I haven't gotten a chance to watch him yet. Watched a little bit of Cam Taylor Britt, and I think he should be a solid NFL corner. I need to see him play a little bit more man to get a better feel for how that part of his game works. But I think he should be a solid NFL corner. It does kind of put to rest the dream that I was perpetuating all morning on Twitter, for those of you that follow me, that Dax Hill will get a chance to play outside. Seems like this kind of puts that to bed.
Probably, which is fine. Like I understand, why you would want to use him as like the Swiss Army knife type guy anyways. And I think that's the part of it, is he can do so many different things. And now you have a guy that can come in and be that fourth corner. And that doesn't mean he's not going to be on the field a ton. And I think that's the fun part, and is going to be the really intriguing part about how Lou Anarumo works these guys, because they've drafted a lot of defense, believe it or not, during his time, not this early and not this level of talent. So it's going to be interesting to see. Will they continue to go with defense, or will offense rise to the top? We'll talk about tight ends, offensive line, and more on what the Bengals could do on day 3 of the draft. But first, I got to tell you about Built Bars, because I got to be honest, it's the NFL draft. Okay. I've spent a ton of time here. Feels like it's, NFL media boot camp. All right. So I've been at Paul Brown Stadium, and I'm not complaining, right? Dream job. Not saying that. Been at Paul Brown Stadium a long time, right? In back-to-back days, and you need a snack, and you don't want to eat chips, and you don't want to eat unhealthy stuff. And I'm still getting my workouts done in the morning and all of that stuff. Well, guess what? I need protein, and Built Bar has helped me get through the 2022 NFL draft up to this point, and they're going to help me on Saturday as well as you're listening to this. So you need to check them out right now if you haven't, at Built.com. And they have protein bars that are covered in 100% chocolate, high in protein, low in sugar, low in calories. And they also have puffs. They're protein-infused marshmallows. They taste amazing, also covered in chocolate. All the chocolate, 100% chocolate. This isn't some crazy, ridiculous concoction. No. It's real, and it's almost too good to be true, but it is true. So check it out at Built.com. Use promo code LOCK15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com.
As we talked about it yesterday, this was the scenario, starting with a guy like Dax Hill, where you could see 3 straight defensive players, and then our foresight was rewarded as the Bengals picked 3 straight Bengals players. But maybe to your chagrin a little bit, James. I will say this. You talked about the competitiveness of Cam Taylor Britt, excited for the competition in camp with Eli Apple. Forgot to mention that earlier, because it sounds like he will be very motivated to go to battle, as it were, in training camp.
Yep. And I will say, I talked to Dax today. He's competitive too. And he's got that, and we can have more time, to talk about, but he's got that quiet calmness about him, much like a Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, where they don't necessarily say a lot, but man, just calm demeanor, it's never too big for you type stuff, which I really like. But no, I agree. I'm excited for Cam Taylor Britt, and the competitive part of it. That'll be fun. I might give Cam Taylor Britt the edge already in that department against Eli Apple. You never know.
It'll be interesting to watch. I'll say this as well. I watched 2 games of Dax Hill this morning. Man, that's going to be tough. We watched 2 games of Dax Hill this morning, and he does not look like a box corner to me. I think he's a free safety. Box safety. Box corner is not a position. I'm still sick, guys. I'm doing my best here. Doesn't look like a box safety to me. Looks like a free safety and corner. And that's a versatile piece that you like. That's the Tyrann Mathieu, Devin McCourty. He was comped to Devin McCourty coming out of high school, by the way.
Interesting. He was a 5-star, by the way. Turned down Nick Saban in Alabama.
Went back and forth in his recruitment and was the top-rated safety recruit in the country. Hardly added weight in Michigan, which makes you wonder about his frame a little bit. Anyway, what we teased for this segment, James, was not talking about the defensive backs the Bengals drafted, but I'll take responsibility for that one as we look ahead to day 3. 3 straight defensive picks has me thinking, if you could get BetOnline odds for the next Bengals pick, I would say tight end, but I think there's a chance it's an offensive lineman, and I think there's a chance it's a wide receiver.
Yeah, baby.
And who knows how they feel about running back, quite frankly. Like that would not shock me.
It wouldn't,
surprise me a little bit. I think it's lower on the priority list, though.
Agreed. And honestly, I think defense could still be there. Like, you never know. I mean, you look at some of these names that are there. We already talked about Perry and Winfrey, and maybe he's just lower on their board because of a medical issue. If he's still there, do you just say, man, the competition's great, let's do it? Tariq Woolen, we talked about him, how he tested. It was insane. And Kobe Bryant's still there. Zion McCollum's still there. So you just never know. My guy Smoke Monday in round 7, that, you never know. Maybe he'll be there. Kingsley Mcguire, you mentioned him. If he's still there, I pick 126. I think it's 136. It's 136. It's like, oh, well, maybe. But no, I'm with you. I think offense. I think we're going to see Brian Callahan a couple times. They have 4 picks left. This is where probably you get the balance. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2-2. It might be 3-1. And then that way it's 4 defense, 3 offense. I'm going to give you a name, 2 names, because I know you're gonna talk about tight ends. But to me, Khalil Shakur, and I might have butchered it, but out of Boise State would make a ton of sense. Can return, right? 6 foot tall. He's not 5'8" like Wan'Dale Robinson, who went earlier than anybody could have projected, by the way.
Yeah.
To the Giants. But yeah, Shakur, I think would be an interesting one. And then the other one, and this would strictly be like if the medical's checked out and everything. If Justin Ross is just still there, is there any shot? Like, is there any shot they look at him and like, because obviously the talent, dude's a freak. And he had was it a heart condition? He had a bunch of stuff that he was going through at Clemson, former teammates with T. Higgins. Dude, I mean, if you can get him and like your medical team's cleared him, it might be worth taking a flyer on for sure. But that's probably why he's falling, is because a lot of teams probably haven't cleared him.
Yeah. I don't know what's going. The medical stuff, it's hard to say, and I don't know what it is for Perry and Winfrey either. We saw Nakobe Dean take a precipitous fall. We saw Travis,
and it was medicals for him.
It was medicals for Dean for sure. We saw the defensive tackle Connecticut Travis Jones. Take a big fall. Lance Zierlein, before day 2 started, tweeted, "This is what I think. This is where I think players will go." And he thought that Travis Jones would go near the top of the second round, not the third round, the top of the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Khalil Shakir from Boise State is interesting.
It's Shakir.
5'11", almost 6 foot, just shy of 6 foot tall. Although at his pro day, he measured a half-inch taller. Go figure.
See, 6 foot, baby.
The favorable tape measures of Boise State. 196.
That's his Tinder height. See, that's just different.
6 foot. Got to round up.
Yep.
Jumped better at his pro day. The only thing that misses for the Bengals, where they would have to give him a pass, is his 3-cone doesn't pass their 3-cone threshold. And so from a threshold perspective, looking at their history, that's the only one. But on day 3, as we talked about with Joe, they're willing to overlook a thing here or there. The other flag for him is the drop rate. Highest career drop rate for any receiver in our spreadsheet. So something to be aware of. I'd say 11.5%.
Man,
drop rate.
That's like Jake drop rate. That's not good.
The only thing I could do is catch.
Uh-huh.
I mean, unless we're talking about names, in which case, yeah, about 11.5% for sure. So I think that would be an interesting name. Justin Ross, man, that one's tough. It's
he was going to be a first rounder. Like he was a freak.
And then he tested really poorly. So
yeah,
that's just tough. He was really good at a young age. I love Justin Ross his freshman year at Clemson. I remember watching him his as a true freshman and thinking, man, I want this guy in the NFL. And his career has had some bumps. And so, yeah, that's a big, we'll see, I'd say. As far as tight end, we said we'd talk about tight end a little bit. Charlie Kohler, the guy that Joe and I picked in the What Will They Do mock, Daniel Bellinger, still available. Jelani Woods was picked, of course. Greg Dulcich was picked. Trey McBride picked. And I wonder if Trey McBride was available in the second round, what they would have done, given the reports that they were very interested. And Jeremy Ruckert has been picked. And I expect we'll start to see some more of these guys start to come off the board. But Daniel Bellinger is the name that stands out to me if Charlie Kohler is picked. And between the two, Charlie Kohler is a guy that would go earlier, according to consensus. Although we have seen on day 2 that the consensus has started to be followed much less, which is what we kind of expected. More unpredictability as things go on. Anyone else at tight end before we talk offensive line quickly?
Well, I think it's insane. I don't know what the Jets are doing at the tight end position, because they signed Tyler Conklin after signing CJ Uzomah, and then they draft Jeremy Ruckert. And I actually like what they've done overall.
Yeah.
You get Sauce Island over there, and I like the running back that they got, believe it or not. I think you give this guy as many weapons as you can in Zachary Wilson. Like, that's awesome. But the downside of it is, why do you need so many damn tight ends, and why are you stealing them from the Bengals? They take Uzama. The Bengals try to get Conklin. Doesn't happen because they sign him. And then Ruckert, who we would be talking about right now as a potential option in round 4, is gone. And who knows? Ruckert might not have been good, but he might have been good. You talk to people at Ohio State, they were pretty high on him. And I'm not talking about fans. I'm talking about people, that cover the team. Like, man, yeah, he could play. So it's one of those things. I don't know. I guess it's tight end NFL over there in East Rutherford, New Jersey.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised they might have gone tight end instead of Zachary Carter, but clearly they felt that if it was a tie, hypothetically, the tie goes to the defensive interior need that they had. Yeah, I don't know if Jamery Ruckert was going to get to the 4th round pick for the Bengals.
Probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, it's fun.
And I didn't think he'd go to the Jets. God.
No. Also, the Cardinals. The Cardinals took Dulcich.
Trey McBride.
No, they took McBride. That's right.
The Broncos took Dulcich, which actually is pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
Sure.
Yeah, they just signed Zach Ertz to an extension, and then
and Max Williams, I think, got another. I mean,
tight
less important, but
yeah,
I don't know what the Cardinals are doing. This is a Bengals show, however, so let's talk offensive linemen a little bit.
Yep.
And the biggest name, I think, and I don't think he'll be there when the Bengals pick, is Jamery Sawyer. Was not an athletic tester, but played tackle at Georgia pretty well.
Yep.
Just under 22 years old, consensus 85th. Just one consensus spot worse than Sean Ryan, who was picked. Sean Ryan was consensus 84th. Darian Kennard, depending on how they feel about his comments about vaccines and whatnot, which he talked about at the Combine.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know how that would weigh for the Bengals at all. And there's actually a bunch of guys when you start to look a little bit deeper.
Well,
Marquise
Donovan
West, Lycidas Smith are the ones that really jump out to me.
Yep, and they need to address offensive line. All right, so yeah, I've been nice and all this stuff about defense and stuff. If the Bengals are going to win the damn Super Bowl 57, the offense is going to carry it. All right, and so they need to add another lineman and someone that they feel like can compete at that left guard spot. Period. Like, that's not up for debate now. And I'm not. We'll save all the other stuff for another. You got to have to. And so, we'll see if they do that. It would have been one thing if, Linderbaum made it there and then they passed on him. It would have been one thing if Cam Jurgens made it to them in round 2 and they passed on him. That stuff didn't happen. And so that didn't. So I can't say, oh, well, you should have taken this guy. But for example, if Jamery Sawyer is there out of Georgia, like, he literally walks in and is probably just playing left guard at a pretty high level. Like, you read the evaluations on him. And so that's a guy that you look at. Donovan West is a guy we talked about at length last week and or earlier this week. Yeah, earlier this week. It's only Friday as we record this, or Saturday. It's Saturday morning now. But that would be a guy that, potentially target. But they need to get one in at least one on day 3. So I don't know if you had to pick positions, and we can end it here. Positions that you want to see addressed. For me, it would be offensive line at least once. I would say offensive line, wide receiver, tight end, edge. Like, in a perfect world, those would be the 4 spots. That's the 4 picks for me, I would say. And not in that order necessarily. And it doesn't have to be like in the 7th round with the 2 7ths. You really just take a guy that you think could maybe make the team. But with those 4th and 5th rounders, I'm going to need it's probably an offensive lineman and a tight end, to be honest with you, unless there's someone that just screams value.
Gets a little bit tougher with having traded the 6th round pick. I was surprised, like I said, when you made fun of me for saying a full pick. I was surprised they gave up a full pick. I'm surprised.
Whatever. Their 6 rounders outside of Chris Evans don't really do much. It's okay.
For sure. But like, I'm thinking about doubling up at corner or doubling up at interior defensive lineman with a guy like Curtis Brooks specifically. I don't know who the corner would be. Maybe you gamble on They've met with a bunch of late round corners. Tony Adams, Jack Jones, and Jasir Taylor, all guys they met with that are late round corners. But I'd be interested to see if they look to double down at corner or interior defensive lineman, or if there is an edge rusher they like. I think we're mostly past the edge rusher phase where there are guys that I really like, but Isaiah Thomas, the guy they met with, who's still available, is a name to keep an eye on, I think. There are a bunch of interior defensive linemen that they met with as well that are going to be available on day 3 that I think need to have their eye. You need to keep your eye on as well. Curtis Brooks, of course, at the local pro day. The Bengals have had plenty of exposure there. That's the guy that we've been talking about nonstop, and I think that's pretty unlikely at this point. But if Perry and Winfrey falls, so they go back to back like they did with linebacker with
Maybe.
Logan Wilson.
If Winfrey's there and it's just like, man, I wouldn't blame them. That's crazy.
Depends on why he's falling, really. They also met with Matt Hensington from Wisconsin, Haskell Garrett from Ohio State, and Eric Johnson from Missouri State.
It would probably be medicals because I don't know what else it would be. It's not an on-field play. So
always hard to say, I would say. Of the tight ends remaining that they've talked to, Isaiah Likely, Nick Muse, and Grant Calcaterra are the ones that we have tracked that they've had meetings with. There might be more that we're unaware of. But as far as what positions I'm interested in, tight end offensive line, probably top of the list. And then wide receiver and doubling down somewhere on defense, probably. I think at this point, the edge ship may have sailed, unless it is Isaiah Thomas. But that would probably have to be in the 4th or 5th. So we'll see. I think a couple offensive picks could be coming up, though, on day 3.
Yeah. No, I think they have to. I think that's just at some point they're going to have to do it. And again, I keep looking at is Kingsley Mcguire still there or is he gone? He's there.
I believe he is still unselected.
Yeah, but will he make it? Sure.
I think he would be the favorite to be one of the top 10 players picked tomorrow.
That would be an example though of a potential where you go edge. That being said, offensive line. Now's the time where I'm like, okay, I get it. The board didn't fall your way. But let's find an offensive lineman that can come in right now. And I don't think it's hard. I think, for example, Jackson Carman, 3rd to 4th round pick. They reached on him last year. Not going to sugarcoat it. Deontay Smith was a 4th round pick. He's going to be in the mix to compete for that job too. Trey Hill, 6th rounder. You can find a guy in what we think is a pretty deep interior line class that can come in and compete with those guys. I really do believe that. And it's probably at pick 136. So hopefully they can find a guy to do that.
Yep. And we talked about it last week, or with Joe earlier this week, perhaps. The position that they appear to have punted on, at least for now, is edge rusher, which you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see if they continue to kick that can down the road in this stacked, I'd say pretty stacked edge rusher class. They had a chance in the 1st round if they wanted to, went with Dax Hill instead. Totally get that. They had a chance after trading up in the 2nd round, but they had a target in mind. Totally get that too. And so that's another one I think that, as you point out, definitely worth keeping an eye on.
You're talking about Ebiketie in the 1st round?
Yeah, Ebiketie is probably the primary name in the 1st round. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I get taking Hill over him. But yeah, I get why you'd mention it. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably in the conversation. You have to pick one, right? If you're going to get a versatile secondary piece or an edge rusher, and they clearly love Hill, especially Andrew Johnson.
I would have taken Ebiketie over, Andrew Booth Jr. for what it's worth. So.
Sure. Day 3, coming up tomorrow. The grind of the draft for James continues. The grind of the draft for you, the viewer, the diehard Bengals fan, continues. And our coverage continues. No days off on draft week, at least not yet. We'll be back Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, whenever day 3 ends, with a recap of the Bengals draft. Until next time, Bengals fans, hoo-day, and have a good one.